The screams didn't sound human at first. They came from behind the glass doors of a convenience store on the south end of Atlanta, echoing through the rain and flashing red-blue lights that painted the sidewalk like a warning. When Monica Evans arrived, she didn't think she just ran. The air was thick with panic and disbelief. Her 17-year-old daughter, Ariel, lay motionless on the ground, her braids half undone, her hands bloodied and cuffed behind her back. A crowd had gathered, phones raised, voices clashing with police commands. Someone yelled, "They beat her, she wasn't resisting." Another voice cracked with grief, "She's just a kid." Officer Brent Walker stood over her, baton still in hand, his chest heaving. His partner, Caleb Norris, hovered nearby, face pale but silent. Both men wore the same blank look, cold, procedural, detached. When Monica broke through the crowd, a bystander tried to stop her. "Ma'am, don't..." But she was already pushing past the yellow tape. "I'm her mother," she shouted. A sergeant blocked her path. "Ma'am, you need to stand back." "I said I'm her mother." Her voice carried across the lot, slicing through the chaos. Reporters hadn't arrived yet, but someone was already live streaming. A dozen camera lights shimmered on the wet asphalt. Monica dropped to her knees beside her daughter. "Ariel, baby, can you hear me?" No response. Only the shallow, broken rhythm of labored breathing. Blood trickled near her ear, dark against the rainwater. An EMT knelt beside Monica, his face tense. "We're losing her airway," he said. "She needs immediate transport." But Officer Walker wasn't done asserting control. "She resisted arrest," he barked. Procedure was followed. "Procedure?" Monica shot back, trembling. "She's 17. What procedure breaks a child's skull?" He didn't answer. He just looked away. The ambulance doors slammed. Blue lights blurred. Ariel was gone before Monica even realized she was still, kneeling in the street, her hands trembling, her palms cut from the gravel. For a long moment, the world around her faded, just a hollow silence in her chest where her heartbeat used to be. Then, as rain streaked down her cheeks, she whispered a promise to no one in particular. "I will not let this disappear." At Grady Memorial Hospital, fluorescent lights hummed above sterile walls. Monica sat in the corner of the ICU waiting room, staring at the clock. 11:47 p.m. The nurse had said the words like they were ordinary. "Your daughter has suffered severe head trauma and is in a medically induced coma." But nothing about it was ordinary. She could still hear the sounds, the thud of a baton, the shouting, the chaos. She pressed her hands together until her knuckles whitened. She wanted to scream, to break something, to make someone listen. But all she could do was wait. That's when a woman approached. Early 40s, sharp suit, sharp eyes. "Mrs. Evans?" Monica nodded numbly. "I'm Detective Lisa Porter with Internal Affairs. I was told your daughter was injured during a police encounter. I'll need a statement." Monica looked up slowly. "A statement?" Lisa hesitated. "I know this isn't the time, but we need details for the preliminary report." Monica's voice was hoarse. "The details? The details are that your officers beat my daughter until she couldn't breathe. That's your detail." Lisa's eyes flickered, guilt buried under professionalism. "I understand, but the department will conduct a full review." "No," Monica said, steady now. "You'll conduct a cover-up, just like you always do. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact." Lisa didn't respond. She left her card on the chair and walked away. Monica didn't touch it. Hours passed. Rain turned into dawn. Through the glass, Atlanta woke up to another ordinary morning, unaware that inside Grady Memorial, a mother was beginning her war. At 8:03 a.m., her phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, missed calls, news alerts. Someone had posted the video, a shaky, rain-soaked clip, Ariel being slammed to the ground, Brent Walker's baton rising and falling, Monica's screams muffled in the background. The caption read, "Atlanta, PD assaults unarmed teen. Viewer discretion advised." By noon, it had 1.8 million views. Reporters surrounded the hospital entrance. The police department issued a statement calling the incident a regrettable escalation during a routine stop. Chief Richard Doyle held a press conference, his voice measured and smooth. "The department takes these matters seriously," he said. "We will fully cooperate with an internal investigation." Monica watched it from the hospital TV. She didn't blink. Every word sounded rehearsed, hollow, lifeless. He called it an incident. She called it an assault. Ariel lay unconscious, 2 rooms away, machines breathing for her, and the men who put her there were still in uniform. Before that night, Monica Evans had been a quiet force in her community. A single mother, a social worker, and a believer in systems that she thought could be fixed from within. She had spent years helping families navigate injustice court hearings, evictions, custody battles. She knew how bureaucracy moved, slow and loud, like rusted machinery. But now she saw it from the other side. And it wasn't slow. It was defensive. It was coordinated. She remembered a case from 2 years prior, an older woman whose son had been beaten during a traffic stop. The department had labeled it unsubstantiated. The evidence had vanished. Back then, Monica had advised her to stay calm and follow procedure. Now that advice tasted like poison. At 2:14 p.m., Monica walked into the hallway outside Ariel's room and called her cousin, David Allen, a civil rights attorney based in D.C. "I need you here," she said flatly. He could tell by her tone that this wasn't about grief, it was about war. "I'm on the first flight out," he said. That night she stood beside Ariel's bed, the rhythmic beeping of machines syncing with her heartbeat. She reached for her daughter's hand. "They think they can bury this," she whispered. "They don't know who they just hurt." Monica Evans had always believed that justice was earned through patience, but patience had left her child broken in a hospital bed. So that night she began her plan. Not revenge reform. First, she wrote every name she remembered from the scene. Second, she gathered every video she could find, live streams, witness uploads, even deleted clips stored in the cloud. Third, she called a friend from college, Samantha Rhodes, now an investigative reporter. "Sam," she said, voice low but steady, "how fast can you make a story go national?" There was silence on the line. Then Samantha said, "Depends how many truths you're ready to burn." "All of them," Monica replied. By morning, the video was on every major network. The department's statement had unraveled under the weight of public outrage. Protesters gathered outside Atlanta City Hall, chanting Ariel's name. Chief Doyle announced that Officers Walker and Norris had been placed on temporary administrative leave. But Monica knew that meant paid vacation. David arrived the next day. He walked into the hospital room, took one look at Ariel, and set his briefcase down. "We're suing them, right?" Monica shook her head. "Not yet." David frowned. "Then what?" She turned toward him, her eyes like stone. "I'm not just coming for the officers. I'm coming for the system that trained them to believe my daughter was a threat." That was the moment everything changed. Because Monica Evans wasn't just a grieving mother anymore, she was a strategist. She knew policy, she knew procedure, and she knew exactly how to make the department collapse under its own corruption. She opened her laptop, logged into the state's public records portal, and began filing requests, incident logs, disciplinary histories, training rosters, every officer, every complaint. The department didn't know it yet, but the woman they had dismissed as just another angry mother was about to become their biggest nightmare. Her daughter's silence had given her purpose. And by the time she was done, Atlanta PD wouldn't just apologize, they'd answer. By sunrise, Atlanta was already pulsing with tension. The front steps of City Hall were crowded with protesters holding hand-painted signs. "Justice for Ariel. Protect our daughters. No more excuses." The smell of rain mixed with cardboard and coffee as reporters gathered, microphones ready. Inside the hospital, Monica Evans watched it all from a TV mounted to the waiting room wall. She hadn't slept. Her daughter, Ariel, remained in a coma. The doctors said the swelling in her brain had stabilized, but warned that recovery, if it happened, would take time. Monica didn't respond. She just stared at the screen, jaw tight. On it, Chief Richard Doyle stood behind a podium at headquarters, the city's flag draped behind him. His tone was careful, rehearsed. "The officers involved are on administrative leave pending internal review," he said. "We ask the public to allow the process to run its course." Process. The word made Monica's stomach turn. Her phone buzzed. David Allen had been watching too. "You see that?" he texted. "He's already building their defense," she replied instantly. "Then we start ours." An hour later, David arrived with a small team, 2 paralegals, and a young intern carrying folders thicker than law books. He looked exhausted but resolute. "They're going to bury this under procedure," he said, laying out documents, across the hospital cafeteria table. "They'll say it was justified use of force. Our job is to prove a pattern." Monica leaned forward. "Then we expose the pattern." David nodded. "We'll start with Officer Brent Walker. He's had complaints before 2 use-of-force reviews in 2019, 1 in 2021, all cleared by Internal Affairs." "Who signed off?" Monica asked. David flipped through the file. "A name that keeps showing up: Captain Richard Doyle, back when he wasn't chief yet." Monica's lips parted slightly. "So he protected them." David looked up. "He built them." That afternoon, Detective Lisa Porter from Internal Affairs called. Her voice was tight, deliberate. "Mrs. Evans, we're reviewing the footage. I'd like to meet with you." Monica's tone was icy calm. "To listen or to manage damage?" "I'm here to investigate," Lisa replied. "Then come to the hospital," Monica said. "See what your department calls procedure." When Lisa arrived, she didn't wear a badge on her belt. She carried a single tablet loaded with body cam clips, official reports, and a transcript that read like a rehearsed play. She began softly. "The officers claim your daughter resisted when asked to exit the store." Monica cut her off. "Did you watch the video?" "Yes." "Then you know she didn't." Lisa hesitated. "The footage is incomplete." "Convenient," Monica muttered. Lisa scrolled through her notes. "We're cross-referencing store security footage and witness videos. The department will make a statement once all evidence is reviewed." Monica leaned back. "And if that review finds what you already saw?" Lisa's voice cracked slightly. "Then the chief will have no choice but to act." Monica studied her face. There was something there, a flicker of doubt. Maybe shame. "You have daughters, Detective?" Lisa looked startled. "Yes." "Then imagine one of them lying where mine is right now, and ask yourself how much longer you'd stay quiet." For a moment, Lisa didn't respond. Then she simply said, "I'll be in touch," and left. That evening, Samantha Rhodes called. Her voice buzzed with restrained excitement. "Monica, you need to see this," she said. "One of my contacts just leaked something from inside APD." "What is it?" "A memo from 2 months ago. Chief Doyle told his precinct captains to limit community escalation during arrests involving minors by controlling the narrative early." Monica's breath caught. "Controlling the narrative?" "Meaning," Samantha said grimly, "get your story out before the truth does." Monica closed her eyes. "Send it to David." The next morning, David walked into Atlanta Police Headquarters with Monica at his side. The marble lobby echoed with every step they took. Cameras followed them, news crews whispering. "That's the mother." At the reception desk, a young officer straightened nervously. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Monica said, voice calm, but cutting. "We're here to deliver a notice of legal intent to the department." He froze, glancing at his supervisor. David placed the envelope on the counter. "You can deliver this directly to Chief Doyle. It includes notice of federal civil rights violations, a motion for preservation of evidence, and a demand for immediate suspension of Officers Walker and Norris." Within seconds, murmurs spread through the lobby. A few officers stopped pretending to type. Monica stood silently beside David, her presence heavier than any threat. As they turned to leave, a voice called from the hallway. "Mrs. Evans?" Monica stopped. It was Captain Doyle himself. He looked composed, but his eyes were alert, measuring her. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss," he said, hands clasped behind his back. "She's not gone," Monica replied evenly. "And neither is my resolve." Doyle's tone shifted, soft but condescending. "You have to understand, emotions are high, but this coming in here making threats won't help your daughter." Monica's stare didn't waver. "You already helped her. Straight into a coma." The officers nearby froze. Even Doyle blinked. Then Monica turned and walked out without another word. That night, Samantha aired her segment. The leaked memo was front and center. The words "control the narrative" burned across TV screens. Civil rights groups seized on it instantly. The mayor's office issued a statement demanding clarification from the department. Within hours, public trust in Chief Doyle's leadership began to crack. David smiled grimly as the headlines rolled in. "You just made him bleed, Monica. But he's not finished. Men like that never admit defeat, they double down." Monica's reply was calm. "Then I'll make him choke on the truth." 2 days later, Officer Caleb Norris broke rank. An anonymous email arrived in Samantha's inbox with no subject line, just a link. It was internal dashcam footage from the night of the beating, showing Ariel handcuffed before Walker struck her the second time. David called immediately. "We can subpoena it officially now. This is evidence of misconduct." Monica's voice was low, steady. "No, it's evidence of a cover-up." By Friday, the city was divided. Some defended the police. Others demanded Doyle's resignation. Through it all, Monica stayed silent publicly. She refused interviews, avoided microphones, and focused on building her case. In private, she built alliances. She met with Tyrone Hayes, a local activist with a network of community organizers who had tangled with APD before. He was blunt, direct. "The city's scared of you," he told her. "You've got them in a corner." "I don't want them scared," she said. "I want them accountable." Tyrone nodded slowly. "Then keep the pressure clean and constant. Don't give them chaos. Give them control that hurts." Monica smiled faintly. "That I can do." Late that night, she sat alone in Ariel's hospital room. Machines beeped steadily. Her daughter's face was peaceful, framed in soft blue light. Monica whispered, "You always said I was too calm for my own good. Maybe that's my weapon." Her phone buzzed a message from David. "Tomorrow's hearing at City Hall. Be ready. They're calling it a community update." Monica knew what that meant. A show. A performance to calm the public. But this time, the performance wouldn't go as planned. Because the mother they'd tried to silence was walking into that meeting armed with evidence, allies, and righteous fury cloaked in composure. And when she spoke, Atlanta wouldn't just hear a mother's pain. It would hear the sound of a system beginning to crack. The morning of the City Hall hearing arrived heavy with humidity and tension. The sun hadn't even cleared the skyline, and already a line of citizens stretched down the marble steps. Parents, teachers, activists, and students, all waiting to witness what Atlanta officials had promised would be a transparent public forum. But everyone knew what it really was: an attempt at damage control. Inside, Monica Evans stood near the back of the chamber, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wore a plain navy blouse and black slacks, unremarkable, steady, professional. But her face was unshakable. She wasn't there for spectacle. She was there for reckoning. At the front sat Chief Richard Doyle, polished as ever, his posture straight, his tone smooth. Beside him was Deputy Mayor Langford, performing concern for the cameras. The room was thick with cameras, reporters, and restless murmurs. Doyle began first. "This department has nothing to hide," he declared. "What happened to Miss Ariel Evans is tragic, but it's being handled according to established protocols. The officers followed their training. Any injury was unintentional. A wave of whispers rippled through the audience. Monica didn't flinch. Her attorney, David Allen, whispered, "He's reading from the PR sheet. Wait for your turn." But Monica didn't wait. When Doyle said the words unintentional injury, she rose. "Chief Doyle," she said loudly, her voice echoing across the chamber, "would you call 3 broken ribs and a fractured skull unintentional?" The room fell silent. Doyle looked momentarily thrown off. "Mrs. Evans, please." "No," she interrupted. "You've had your turn. You stood behind your badge and called my daughter's blood an accident. So now you can answer this. Why did your officers deactivate their body cams 8 minutes before she hit the ground?" The microphones caught every syllable. The crowd erupted in gasps. Doyle's assistant scrambled through papers, pretending to search for a response. "That claim is under review." Monica stepped closer. "You don't have to review it. I have the footage." At that moment, Samantha Rhodes stepped forward from the press section, holding up her tablet. She projected the leaked dash-cam footage onto the courtroom screen. The chamber lights dimmed slightly, and every eye turned toward the image. Ariel, small, frightened, raising her hands while Officer Walker barked commands. She complied. Then came the flash, the strike, the scream, the fall. Someone in the audience sobbed. Another shouted, "Play it again." When the clip ended, the silence was unbearable. Doyle's lips tightened. "This footage was obtained illegally." David cut him off. "Illegally, Chief? You mean truthfully? Because it sure looks like the evidence your department lost." The deputy mayor leaned toward Doyle, whispering urgently, but the cameras had already captured the panic. Monica's voice steadied. "My daughter's lying in a coma because men trained by you believed that a teenager buying snacks looked like a threat. And now you call that training?" Doyle's face twitched. "You're twisting this." "No," she said. "I'm rewriting." Outside, the crowd had doubled. The hearing streamed live on local networks, and within minutes it trended nationwide. Hashtags appeared across social media. Justice for Ariel, End Qualified Silence, Atlanta Reckoning. Inside, council members scrambled to contain the moment. "We'll recess for 15 minutes, one announced, voice cracking, but Monica didn't sit down. She turned to face the cameras. "I want every parent watching this to remember one thing. The system only reforms when you make it uncomfortable to stay the same." Applause broke out, not from the officials, but from the gallery. People who'd never met her before were standing, clapping, crying. David leaned over and whispered, "You just turned the hearing into history." When the session resumed, Detective Lisa Porter requested permission to speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the microphone. Doyle's glare could have cut glass. "I'm assigned to Internal Affairs," she began carefully. "And I can confirm Mrs. Evans is correct. Portions of the body cam footage were deleted manually before the report was filed." The entire room froze. Doyle slammed his pen onto the desk. "Detective, you are out of line." Lisa didn't look at him. "And I can also confirm that Captain Doyle personally reviewed and signed the deletion authorization." Gasps. Chaos. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Monica stared at Lisa, their eyes meeting for the first time since the hospital. A small, silent nod passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, courage. The deputy mayor tried to restore order. "This chamber will come to order. This hearing is suspended pending investigation." But it was too late. The blue wall had cracked. That night, Monica returned to the hospital exhausted, her clothes damp with sweat, her heart heavy but steady. Ariel still hadn't woken up, but the doctor said there was activity, a flicker of response when they called her name. Monica sat beside the bed, her voice soft. "You did it, baby. They tried to erase you, but you made them see." Her phone buzzed again. Samantha. "Monica, it's everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, local radio, you name it. They're calling this Atlanta's George Floyd moment." Monica closed her eyes. "No, it's Ariel's moment. At midnight, Chief Doyle released a second press statement, short, defensive, and trembling beneath the surface. The department condemns any misconduct and will cooperate with the state attorney's review. But the truth was already out of his hands. Within 24 hours, state officials from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division contacted David Allen. They wanted all Monica's documentation, every video, every memo, every transcript. When he told her, Monica didn't smile. "Good," she said. "But they won't fix this for me. I'm not done." David frowned. "You've already destroyed his credibility. What more can you do?" Monica looked at her daughter, tubes and monitors humming softly in the background. He led a department that thought it could bury children. "I'm not done until they rebuild it from the ground up or burn it down trying." 2 weeks later, a subpoena arrived for Chief Doyle. Officer Walker and Officer Norris were both charged with felony assault under color of authority. But what stunned everyone most wasn't the charges, it was Lisa Porter's name on the witness list. When reporters asked why she'd come forward, Lisa answered simply, "Because silence was killing my conscience." In the weeks that followed, Monica's quiet persistence became a movement. She wasn't a politician. She didn't want a podium. But every time she spoke, more people listened. Churches opened their doors for town halls. Civil rights lawyers from around the country volunteered their services. Donations poured in for Ariel's recovery fund, and the legal team's continued case. And through it all, Monica stayed focused not on fame, not on revenge, but on proof. Proof that systems only fall when people refuse to fear them. 3 months later, as spring came to Georgia, Ariel finally opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was her mother sitting exactly where she'd been every day. Monica leaned forward, tears breaking through for the first time. "Hey baby, you're safe." Ariel blinked slowly, confused but breathing on her own. "What happened?" she whispered. Monica took her hand. "You lived," she said, "and now we're making sure they learn what that means." The threat they didn't see coming. 2 days after the hearing, Atlanta's skyline glittered beneath gray clouds that promised another storm. But inside the Evans home, the storm had already arrived. Monica sat at her dining table, surrounded by stacks of folders, legal drafts, and press requests she had no intention of answering. She wasn't chasing publicity, she was building a record. Every lie, every file, every timestamp from the police department was being cataloged and cross-referenced. Her phone rang. David Allen. "Federal Civil Rights Division is opening a preliminary investigation," he said without preamble. "You did it. They're sending auditors next week." Monica didn't smile. "Good, but it's not over." David exhaled. "You're right, because they're going to hit back." He was right. That night, someone did. Around 9:30 p.m., Monica noticed the headlights first, 2 cars idling across the street. Not neighbors, not reporters. They weren't even pretending to hide. When she peeked through the blinds, one of the men looked straight at her, phone raised to his ear. The next morning, she found her mailbox open, the lid hanging loose, and a thin envelope sitting inside with no stamp. Inside it was a single piece of paper that read, "Drop it before you lose more. No name, no return address." When she showed it to David, he looked furious. "Intimidation. Classic. You'll need to report this immediately." "To who?" she snapped. "The same department that put my daughter in the ICU?" He didn't argue. Instead, he called Samantha Rhodes, who arranged for a quiet meeting with Special Agent Eleanor Briggs, a federal investigator assigned to monitor high-risk civil rights cases. They met in a small cafe off Peachtree Street, where the air smelled of espresso and risk. Eleanor, in her 50s, calm and razor-sharp, listened without interrupting as Monica laid out the letter and described the men outside her house. When she finished, Eleanor leaned forward. "You've rattled the department," she said. "That means you're close, but you need to protect yourself now." Monica's tone stayed level. "I'm not backing down." "I'm not asking you to," Eleanor replied. "I'm assigning protection. Discreet, but constant. If they make one more move, I'll have jurisdiction to open an obstruction case." For the first time in days, Monica's breath steadied. The next morning, news broke. Officer Walker's personnel file had been leaked. It wasn't Monica's doing. Someone inside the department had sent it to half a dozen journalists. It revealed a pattern of brutality complaints, 5 in total, none of which had resulted in discipline. All had been resolved internally. Within hours, the mayor's office released a statement demanding Chief Doyle's suspension pending investigation. Doyle fired back, blaming rogue officers and media distortion. That afternoon, a city council meeting turned chaotic when activists packed the gallery chanting, "Fire Doyle! Fire Doyle!" Monica stayed silent through it all. She didn't need to chant. Her silence had already made more noise than any protest ever could. At the hospital, Ariel's progress was slow but visible. Her eyes followed movement now. Her hands occasionally twitched when her mother spoke. Monica sat beside her, updating her softly. "You're changing the world, baby. You're making them see." The door opened quietly. Detective Lisa Porter stood there, hesitant but resolute. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "They've pulled me off internal affairs, transferred me to traffic." Monica frowned. "For telling the truth?" Lisa nodded. "But I'm not done. I made copies of everything. Internal memos, deleted files, complaint summaries. They can bury me, but they can't bury evidence that's already out." She handed Monica a flash drive. "Use it wisely." Monica stared at it like it was a live wire. "Why are you helping me?" Lisa's reply was soft. "Because you were right. I do have a daughter, and I couldn't look her in the eye after watching what they did to yours." By evening, Samantha aired the next bombshell. Internal emails showing Doyle's command staff had altered reports after the beating to downplay the force used. The city's outrage reached a breaking point. Calls for Doyle's resignation turned into demands for prosecution. David called Monica that night. "You just detonated their entire chain of command." Monica exhaled. "Then we keep going until the whole department rebuilds from scratch." But just as she began to feel momentum, the system retaliated again. At 2 a.m., police cruisers swarmed the street in front of her house. Officers claimed they'd received a noise complaint. There was no noise. Only Monica's quiet alarm. As blue lights flashed across her windows, Eleanor Briggs called within minutes. "We're aware. Stay inside. They're trying to rattle you into reacting. Don't." Monica didn't. She stood at the window, arms crossed, watching them loiter. Then leave. Not a word spoken. Not a law broken. The next morning, Samantha called with breaking news. "Monica, you need to see this." "What now?" They found something in Doyle's records. Financial irregularities. Kickbacks from a supplier who sold the department body cams, the same model your daughter's attackers turned off. Monica's silence was deafening. "You mean the corruption goes all the way to procurement?" "Exactly. And guess who approved the vendor?" Monica already knew. "The mayor." Samantha hesitated. "This could destroy careers." "Good," Monica said coldly. "Then we're finally getting somewhere." Within a week, the Department of Justice confirmed a full-scale civil rights and corruption investigation into Atlanta PD. Chief Doyle was placed on administrative leave. The mayor was subpoenaed. Eleanor Briggs briefed Monica privately. "They'll call you a hero and a troublemaker in the same sentence," she warned. "Are you ready for that?" Monica's answer was steady. "They can call me whatever they want, as long as my daughter wakes up in a safer city." That night, Monica returned home to find something taped to her front door, a photo of her and Ariel leaving the hospital weeks ago, grainy and zoomed in. On the back, a single word: enough. But this time, she didn't call David. She called Eleanor. "They're watching again," she said. Eleanor's tone sharpened. "Good. Let them. Because now we're watching them back." From that moment on, the intimidation stopped. The next headline told the story better than Monica ever could. "Mother who exposed police brutality. Sparks federal probe Atlanta faces its reckoning." And behind that headline, one truth stood taller than fear. Monica Evans hadn't set out to be a symbol. She'd set out to save her child. But somewhere along the way, She'd started saving a city. The first federal investigators arrived in Atlanta under the radar. No sirens, no cameras, no grand press statements. Just a team of quiet people in gray suits carrying folders marked DOJ Civil Rights Division. But everyone inside the police department felt it. The tension, the silence that follows when power realizes it's being watched. Monica Evans didn't attend the opening meeting, but her name was on every page of the briefing packet. Her documentation, her timeline, her precision. She had done half the work for them. Still, she wasn't celebrating. She knew systems don't crumble easily. They rot from the inside first. At her kitchen table, surrounded by legal pads and cold coffee, Monica reviewed a spreadsheet Lisa Porter had sent the week before. It was brutal reading. Dozens of misconduct complaints marked unsubstantiated, each tied to the same 5 officers. Every one of those sign-offs carried Doyle's signature. David called that morning. "They've frozen his accounts," he said. The DOJ found evidence that he used department funds to pay off legal settlements quietly. A slush fund, buried, under equipment maintenance. Monica rubbed her forehead. So he wasn't just protecting bad cops, he was profiting from them. "That's what it looks like," David said. "They're preparing to indict." But Monica wasn't, smiling. "What about Walker and Norris?" she asked. "They're still on paid leave," he replied bitterly. "But that's about to change." That same afternoon, Officer Brent Walker's mugshot appeared on every Atlanta news broadcast. Charged with first-degree assault and official misconduct, he looked smaller in that orange jumpsuit than he ever had behind a badge. His lawyer claimed it was an unfortunate overreaction. The public didn't buy it. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse holding candles and signs with Ariel's photo. Some wore shirts reading "Justice has a face." Others simply stood in silence. Monica didn't attend the vigil. She watched from her living room window as her neighborhood lit up with flickering candlelight. People she had never met before stood shoulder to shoulder for her daughter. She whispered, "They're standing for you, baby," to the air. "You did this." 3 weeks later, Ariel's recovery took a small miracle of its own. Her physical therapist reported reflex movement stronger than before. Her right hand squeezed Monica's for the first time. The doctors couldn't explain it, but Monica didn't need science. She called it faith and fury combined. That same day, Eleanor Briggs visited her. "Doyle's been officially charged," Eleanor said. "Wire fraud, falsification of reports, conspiracy to obstruct justice. He's going to lose everything." Monica just nodded. "What happens now?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "Now the rebuild begins, but it needs leadership from the outside. Someone people trust." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Don't look at me." "I wasn't," Eleanor replied, smirking. "I was looking at Lisa Porter." Lisa's transfer to traffic hadn't lasted long. The DOJ reinstated her under federal protection as part of the reform task force. She would lead the internal restructuring of the department, new training standards, new oversight committees, mandatory audits. When Lisa told Monica the news, she laughed softly through tears. "You realize you started this?" Monica shook her head. "No, I just refused to end it." Then came the first victory. 6 months after the attack, the Atlanta Police Department issued a public apology, not the kind written by lawyers, but by those who had once stayed silent. The new interim chief, appointed under federal supervision, faced the cameras and said, "We failed. We hurt the people we swore to protect. And for that, we will rebuild from the ground up." For the first time, Monica didn't feel rage when she watched a press conference. She felt something close to relief, but she wasn't done. David approached her with a new file that evening. "The DOJ wants to establish a permanent civilian review board," he said. "They're offering you a position, chairwoman." Monica stared at him. "You mean they want me to oversee the same department that put my child in a coma?" David nodded. "Exactly." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she said quietly, "Good. Let them report to a mother for once." Her appointment sent shockwaves through city politics. Some called it symbolic, others called it historic. But Monica ignored both. She attended every reform session, reviewed every training manual, and personally signed off on new accountability measures. She didn't want apologies, she wanted proof. When reporters asked why she accepted the role, she said only, "Because justice isn't revenge. It's responsibility." One afternoon, months into her work, Monica stood outside a training session for rookie officers. Through the glass, she watched Lisa teaching de-escalation techniques: respect first, authority second. The recruits were listening, truly listening. Tyrone Hayes, the activist who had been there since the protests, joined her. "You really changed it," he said quietly. Monica smiled faintly. "Not yet, but it's bending." Then 1 year too why. The day after the beating, something happened that no one saw coming. Ariel walked. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't easy. But with 2 nurses on either side, she took 3 steps toward her mother. Tears blurred Monica's vision as she rushed forward. Ariel's voice was weak but steady. "Mom, did they fix it?" Monica knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "We're still fixing it," she whispered. "But they'll never hurt another child the way they hurt you." When news of Ariel's recovery spread, Atlanta turned out once more, not in protest, but in gratitude. Churches held vigils of thanks. School kids painted murals of her bravery. One of them read, "She fell so justice could rise." Samantha's final report aired that weekend. Her voice narrated over clips of the Journey body cam footage, hearings, protests, reforms. The closing line hit like a heartbeat. In a city that once silenced the truth, one mother's calm became its loudest weapon. By winter, the DOJ investigation concluded. The report was 432 pages long and brutal in its honesty. It listed decades of abuse, falsified evidence, intimidation, and corruption. But the final recommendation carried Monica's fingerprints. Community oversight must be permanent, independent, and led by those directly affected by departmental misconduct. The City Council voted unanimously. It passed into law as the Evans Act. The day the law took effect, Monica visited Ariel's old hospital room. It was empty now, quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. She stood where the machines once stood, whispering to the stillness. We turned pain into policy. Then she walked out, into a city that finally looked different. Months later, she sat with David and Lisa at a cafe overlooking Centennial Park. The conversation drifted between legal reforms and family updates, but when David asked her what she would do next, she smiled softly. "Live," she said, "for both of us." Lisa raised her coffee. To the women who refused silence. Monica clinked her cup gently against hers. To the daughters who made us fight. Atlanta still carried scars. No city erases them completely, but it carried new light too. In every precinct, new plaques bore the Evans name. Not as a memorial, but as a reminder. Justice begins when someone refuses to be afraid. And as the sun dipped behind the skyline that had once glowed red and blue with chaos, Monica Evans finally allowed herself to breathe. Her daughter was alive. The truth was undeniable. And the system that nearly broke them both had been forced to answer. She didn't win through anger or vengeance. She won by standing still while the world around her learned to move. The day the subpoena for Monica Evans arrived, it wasn't from a courthouse in Atlanta, it was from Washington, D.C. The United States Congress wanted her to testify before the House Committee on Civil Rights and Law Enforcement Oversight. Her story. Ariel's story had ignited something bigger than one city's reckoning. It had become a movement. When the letter came, Monica sat quietly at her desk for a long time. The embossed seal at the top glimmered faintly under the morning light. David, sitting across from her, waited for her reaction. "They want me to testify," she said finally, almost whispering. David nodded. "They should. What you built changed everything." Monica looked down at the page. "No, what they broke forced me to." A week later, the headlines were everywhere. Monica Evans to testify on National Police Accountability Reform. Mother who sparked DOJ investigation heads to Washington. Reporters called her home nonstop. Activists requested interviews. But Monica refused every invitation. Her only statement was simple: "I'll speak where it matters most under oath." Ariel, now walking short distances with a cane, watched her mother pack for the trip. "You're nervous," she said softly. Monica smiled faintly. "A little." "Why? You already beat them." Monica shook her head. "Sweetheart, winning isn't the same as changing. This is about making sure no one else has to fight like we did." Ariel's eyes glistened. "Then tell them everything." The hearing chamber in Washington buzzed with tension. Rows of cameras lined the walls. Senators whispered. Aides shuffled papers. Journalists scribbled notes. When Monica took her seat behind the microphone, the murmuring stopped. She wasn't dressed for television. No pearls, no tailored suit, just a dark blazer and quiet strength. Chairwoman Eleanor Briggs, now officially appointed to lead the Federal Oversight Office, gave a nod from the panel. "Mrs. Evans," she began, "thank you for being here, please. Tell us what happened in Atlanta and what must happen next." Monica adjusted the mic slightly. Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. "Madam Chair, members of the committee, my daughter Ariel was 17 years old when 2 police officers decided she looked dangerous. They didn't see a student or a child, they saw a threat. They beat her until her body stopped responding." Gasps rippled through the room. Monica continued. "When I demanded answers, they called it a procedure. When I asked for accountability, they called it an investigation. But what it really was protection. Not for my daughter, but for them." She paused. "You cannot reform what you refuse to measure. For decades, departments across this country have hidden misconduct behind policy, paperwork, and politics. You want to stop this? Make every case public, every file, every complaint. Transparency is not a punishment, it's prevention." One congressman leaned forward. "Mrs. Evans, what would you say to officers who claim this will make their jobs harder?" Monica looked him straight in the eye. "I would tell them it makes their jobs honest." The room erupted in quiet applause. That night, the clip of her testimony went viral within hours. The hashtags returned. Monica Evans testifies. Justice for Ariel. Accountability Act. News outlets replayed her line, "You cannot reform what you refuse to measure," like a mantra. Civil rights groups across the country quoted her in campaigns. Within a month, Congress introduced a bipartisan bill, the National Police Accountability and Transparency Act, modeled in part on the Evans Act from Atlanta. "David," called her at home, barely containing his emotion. "They used your exact words in the draft summary. You're in the congressional record now." Monica exhaled softly. "Then let it mean something." Back in Atlanta, the reforms continued. To ripple outward, Lisa Porter, now promoted to Assistant Chief of Operations under federal oversight, implemented a nationwide pilot program for officer accountability. Tyrone Hayes launched a nonprofit organization called Ariel's Voice, providing legal and emotional support to families of police brutality victims. The organization's slogan, printed on every banner, came from Monica's testimony. "Justice is measured by transparency." Samantha Rhodes, the journalist who first aired the story, produced a documentary chronicling the case. It won an Emmy and opened with the line, "This is not a story about a mother who lost faith in the system. It's a story about a mother who taught the system what faith actually costs." A year later, Monica and Ariel visited Washington together. The law had passed. Funding was secured for national oversight boards in all 50 states. The Evans Act had become the blueprint for reform across America. As they walked through the Capitol rotunda, Ariel looked up at her mother. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Monica's steps slowed. "Every single day." "Then, how do you keep going?" Monica smiled sadly. "Because wishing doesn't build anything. Work does." Outside the Capitol, a reporter called out, Mrs. Evans, do you think the system is finally fixed? Monica paused, looking past the cameras, toward the horizon. No, she said softly. But it's finally listening. The flashbulbs popped. The reporter lowered her mic. Ariel slipped her arm around her mother's. Together they walked toward the steps where sunlight broke through gray clouds. And in that moment, the city that once symbolized power and distance felt smaller, humbled, even by the quiet determination of two women who refused to surrender. That night, back in Atlanta, Monica returned to the rebuilt precinct headquarters. A new plaque hung by the entrance. The Evans Commission on Public Trust established to ensure that every act of authority is matched by equal accountability. Below it was a quote carved in stone. Justice isn't what we demand when we're angry. It's what we build when we refuse to stop. Monica touched the words gently. Behind her, Ariel waited with a cane in one hand and a future in the other. They walked through the doors together, not as victims, not as symbols, but as proof that one mother's resolve could shake a nation. The months that followed turned into something Monica Evans could never have imagined. What started as one mother's outcry in Atlanta became a national reckoning, then a global conversation. From Los Angeles to New York, departments began implementing the Evans Protocol mandatory transparency systems that required officers' misconduct histories to be visible to the public. In cities like Chicago and Baltimore, people whispered her name like she was a symbol of impossible change that had somehow become real. But Monica never thought of herself as a hero. She thought of herself as a mother who refused to sit down. Every morning she woke before dawn, made coffee, and read through emails from strangers, teachers, parents, officers, even inmates, each one telling her how the Evans Act had changed their city. "Your fight made my brother's case reopen," one message said. Another, from a young officer in Texas, read, "Ma'am, we got new training. It's harder but fairer. I think you saved lives, even ours." She never responded to all of them. She just saved every message in a folder on her laptop titled, "Proof It Worked." Ariel was recovering faster now. Her speech had come back, her walk steadier each week. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park near the old courthouse, Ariel asked quietly, "Do you miss who you were before?" "All this?" Monica smiled faintly. "Every day, but I like who I had to become even more." Ariel nodded slowly. "You became their worst fear." "No," Monica corrected softly. "I became their lesson." 2 years after the attack, a new headline appeared: France and Canada to adopt Evans Accountability Framework. The world was watching what had worked in Atlanta. The United Nations invited Monica to speak at a human rights conference in Geneva. She almost declined. She didn't care about stages, but Ariel insisted. "Mom, they need to hear you," she said. "They need to see what strength looks like when it's quiet." So Monica went. When she stepped onto that stage, the applause felt endless, not for her, but for what she represented, the idea that ordinary people could still bend institutions toward justice. She began her speech without notes, just conviction. "When my daughter was beaten," she said, "I thought justice meant punishment. I was wrong. Justice means reconstruction. It means changing the conditions that allowed the wrong to happen in the first place. If your policies protect power more than people, they are not justice, they are fear written in legal language." The crowd stood before she even finished. Delegates from nations she'd only ever seen on maps clapped and nodded. Afterward, a woman from South Africa approached her with tears in her eyes. "We are starting our own review board," she said. "We're calling it Ariel's Table." Monica had to look away before she cried. The world was shifting slowly but visibly, and somehow her child's name was part of that shift. Back in Atlanta, the Evans Commission headquarters buzzed. With constant movement reform plans, training audits, community liaisons, Lisa Porter, now the director of public integrity, worked closely with her every day. Some nights they stayed until dawn, reviewing case summaries, drafting proposals, arguing over policy language. But beneath the exhaustion was something rare, hope that didn't feel naive anymore. "You realize we've become what they used to say was impossible?" Lisa said one evening, rubbing her eyes. Monica chuckled softly. If I believed in impossible, we wouldn't be sitting here. Lisa smiled. You're relentless. Monica's answer was quiet but certain. That's what it takes to change the world built on silence. But the movement's success didn't come without backlash. There were still protests from police, unions, lawsuits claiming overreach, commentators calling her the woman who broke law enforcement. Some nights when she turned on the TV, she heard her name twisted by talking heads into something political, something distorted. But she refused to respond. She knew the difference between noise and history. One fades, the other endures. And history, she decided, was already on her side. When Ariel turned 20, she started college, majoring in political science. Her first essay was titled, Systems Don't Change Themselves. Her professor later told Monica it was one of the best submissions he'd ever read. Your daughter doesn't write like a victim, he said. She writes like someone who expects accountability. Monica smiled. She learned from experience. Ariel would visit her mother's office often, watching her talk with mayors, commissioners, and activists. Sometimes she'd sit quietly in the corner and study the maps of districts pinned to the wall. Each one had notes scribbled in Monica's, handwriting dates, reforms, new programs underway. Why do you still work this hard? Ariel asked once. You already fixed what broke us. Monica turned toward her, eyes soft. Because someone else's daughter is still waiting. That winter, as snow dusted the steps of the courthouse where everything had begun, the city of Atlanta held a ceremony. The old police headquarters building had been rebuilt into a public accountability center, part museum, part training facility, part memorial. At the entrance stood a bronze sculpture of a woman standing beside a young girl, their hands clasped. Beneath it, engraved words read, To the women who refuse to forget. When Monica saw it for the first time, she didn't cry. She just stood still, hand resting gently on the bronze fingers of the figure that looked like her. For once, she felt peace, not victory, not vengeance, just peace. Samantha Rhodes stood beside her, camera crew waiting. You know, she said softly, there's a whole generation growing up who'll never know what Atlanta was before you changed it. Monica smiled. Good. That means we did it right. That night, as she drove home, the city lights flickered through the windshield gold and white against the dark. She thought of every person she'd met along the way. David with his relentless logic, Lisa with her courage, Tyrone with his defiance, Eleanor with her precision. Every one of them had carried a piece of this burden until it became a shared weight instead of a solitary one. She pulled into her driveway and sat for a while staring at her front porch, the same porch where she had once found that first threat letter. Now there were flowers, white lilies left anonymously every week. She never asked who left them. She just accepted them as a promise kept by the city that once tried to silence. Her inside, Ariel was waiting with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Mom, she said softly, when do we stop fighting? Monica smiled, easing into her chair. When there's nothing left to fix. And maybe not even then. Ariel laughed. That sounds like forever. Monica nodded. Then I guess we're going to be very busy. As the night deepened, the house filled with quiet warmth. Outside, the city breathed, alive and cautious, but different now because someone had made it impossible to go back to how things were. In neighborhoods, once afraid to call for help, trust had begun to take root. In precincts once blind to bias, reform had replaced denial. It was fragile, imperfect, but real. And somewhere between the hum of the streetlights and the soft rhythm of her daughter's laughter, Monica Evans finally allowed herself to believe something she hadn't dared to think before. That justice, when pursued without hate, could actually heal. The fight had started with blood and silence. It ended with truth and rebuilding. And as the world kept moving, so did she, one step ahead, one promise kept, one city forever changed. Because in the end, it wasn't about punishment. It was about transformation. And she had proven one voice armed with truth could rebuild an entire nation. By the 3rd anniversary of Ariel's beating, Monica Evans had become a name people whispered with reverence and caution. In government circles, she was called the architect. In newsrooms, the conscience of Atlanta. But to herself, she was still just a mother trying to keep a promise. Every morning, she still woke before sunrise, poured her coffee, and opened her inbox filled with messages from cities across the country. Some were reports updates from oversight, boards in Detroit, Phoenix, and Oakland, all adopting variations of the Evans Act. Others were personal mothers and fathers who'd lost children to brutality, now fighting back with her playbook. One message caught her breath. It was from Marisol Reyes, a nurse from San Antonio. "My son Daniel was killed during a routine stop. We couldn't get answers for 2 years. Your reforms just forced the release of his records. They lied to us. Thank you for giving us the truth." Monica reread it twice. Her throat tightened. Truth wasn't victory, it was oxygen. And even now, 3 years later, it was still saving people who'd been suffocating in silence. By spring, the Evans Protocol had crossed borders. The European Union adopted a transparency model inspired by Atlanta's transformation. News anchors called it the Evans Effect. Government officials in Germany, Canada, and South Africa sent delegations to study her commission's framework. In one photo, she stood with a crowd of foreign ministers and reform advocates, holding a document with a new name on it, the Global Policing Trust Compact. When reporters asked her how she felt seeing her work go international, Monica answered the same way she always did. "It's not mine. It belongs to everyone who refused to stay quiet." Still, change came with its shadows. Power doesn't disappear when it's challenged, it adapts. And soon, Monica began to see a different kind of resistance rising, not the open defiance of the old guard, but the quiet, well-funded pushback of those who wanted to turn her progress into paperwork. Lawsuits mounted. Conservative lobbyists called her reforms anti-police and financially reckless. Politicians tried to water down the Evans Act by attaching amendments that would limit data transparency. At first, Monica ignored them, but when one proposal reached Congress that would allow local departments to seal misconduct records after 3 years, she knew the movement was in danger of becoming a headline instead of a legacy. David Allen, ever the realist, warned her. "They're playing the long game now. They'll smile for cameras and undo you from the inside." Monica leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. "Then we fight from the inside too." She called a meeting of her commission that night. The agenda wasn't printed, it didn't need to be. Everyone in that room knew what was at stake. "We built this out of pain," she said quietly. "Now they're trying to turn it into paperwork. I'm not going to let them." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The room fell into a vow of silence, the kind that meant unanimous agreement. 2 weeks later, Monica walked back into Washington not as a witness this time, but as a reformer defending her law. The hearing room looked the same, but the air was different, thicker, more political. One senator, a man who'd once praised her on live television, now leaned forward with a polished smile. "Mrs. Evans, do you really believe every minor infraction should remain public record? Isn't forgiveness part of justice too?" Monica's answer came without hesitation. "Forgiveness is earned," she said. "Transparency is owed." Cameras clicked. That single line headlined every outlet by evening. The amendment failed by 1 vote. Later that night, she returned to her hotel room, too tired to celebrate. She poured herself a glass of water, turned off her phone, and looked out the window at the city that had both broken and remade her. She thought of Ariel, now 21, studying public policy, interning with the Department of Justice, working quietly on expanding youth advocacy programs. The same system that nearly killed her was now learning from her. A knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Lisa Porter, smiling wearily. "You're still standing," she said, half laughing. Monica smiled faintly. "So are you." Lisa handed her a folder. "You should see this." Inside was a report from the new Oversight Bureau. Misconduct complaints nationwide had dropped by 28% in 3 years. Public satisfaction with law enforcement transparency had doubled. Monica's hands trembled slightly as she read. "It's working," she whispered. Lisa nodded. It's working everywhere. A month later, Monica received an invitation to speak at Harvard Law's graduation ceremony. She declined. Instead, she sent Ariel in her place. That night, Monica watched the live stream. Her daughter stood at the podium, strong and composed, speaking to thousands of new graduates. My mother taught me that justice isn't a destination, Ariel said. It's a daily maintenance job. It rusts if you stop caring for it, so whatever you do, don't stop. The crowd rose in applause. Monica's eyes blurred. She hadn't cried in years, but that night, she let herself. 1 year later, the Evans Global Accountability Foundation opened its doors. Its mission was simple: fund and train reformers around the world. On its front wall hung a black and white photo of Ariel, smiling before everything changed. Monica's speech at the opening was brief. Every fight I've ever won began in a place I never wanted to be, she said. But if you stand in that place long enough, you stop being a victim. You become the reminder. When she finally retired from public service at 60, she did it quietly, no cameras, no farewell press conference. She moved to a small house by Lake Lanier, where mornings began with quiet reflection instead of courtrooms and hearings. Sometimes, she'd walk along the shore and see children playing, their laughter echoing across the water. She thought of the years when that sound had been replaced by sirens, and every time she smiled, because those sirens were quieter now. On the 5th anniversary of the Evans Act, the city unveiled a final memorial, a circular plaza with 17 pillars, each engraved with the names of victims whose cases had been reopened under her reforms. In IR, the center stood one name larger than the rest: Ariel Evans. She survived, so others could too. Monica stood beside her daughter hand in hand as the mayor read the dedication. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and for the first time in years, Monica felt the weight of her fight lifting. As the crowd dispersed, Ariel turned to her mother. You built something they can't erase. Monica's gaze lingered on the plaque. No, she said softly. We built it. Together. They stood there long after everyone had gone, watching the sunset stain the bronze letters in gold. And for the first time since the night everything changed, Monica Evans felt free, not because justice had been perfect, but because she had proven it could still be possible. She looked up at the sky, her voice quiet but steady. I kept my promise, baby, she whispered, and it mattered. The wind carried her words away, but the world she had remade stayed still, listening. Years passed quietly, and the sound of change no longer came from sirens or courtrooms, it came from classrooms. It came from debates, town halls, and new generations who spoke the language of reform as if it had always existed. The Evans Act had become a cornerstone of law curricula across the United States, and every new police cadet now began training by reading the Evans Protocol as standard doctrine. For Monica Evans, life had slowed, but her purpose hadn't vanished. She was older now, gray strands softening her curls, her walk slower but steady. The lake outside her house reflected the same light that once shone off protest signs. She spent mornings reading, evenings writing letters to people she'd once marched beside. But her world was still deeply connected to the movement she'd started. Ariel had become its beating heart. By 28, she was already serving as deputy director at the National Commission for Law Enforcement Accountability, the same agency that had once investigated her mother's case. Her rise wasn't because of her name, it was because of her resolve. She carried Monica's composure, but none of her restraint. Ariel was direct, relentless, a force of new energy that refused to let the reform stagnate. When journalists asked her about following in her mother's footsteps, she'd smile and say, I'm not walking behind her. I'm continuing the path she made. Monica loved watching that fire. Sometimes she'd sit in her living room watching Ariel's interviews on television, feeling a strange mixture of pride and distance. The world had moved forward, but the ache of those first nights in the hospital never left her bones. Some scars, she knew, are meant to stay as reminders. In 2035, a major test arrived for the legacy they had built. A new administration came to power, skeptical of federal oversight. Funding cuts were proposed for national review boards, and whispers began in Congress that the Evans Act had served its purpose and should be revisited. Ariel flew to Atlanta that weekend, pacing the porch where her mother sat quietly, with a book. "They're trying to dismantle it," Ariel said, voice tense. "They think people have moved on." Monica didn't look surprised. "They always think that once the noise fades, the pain fades too. But we can't lose everything you built," Ariel said. Monica closed her book slowly. "Then you'll remind them. You know what to do." Ariel hesitated. "Mom, you'll come with me, right?" Monica smiled, but her eyes carried a knowing calm. "No, this fight has your name now." 3 days later, Ariel stood on the steps of the Capitol just as her mother had years before. But this time, Monica watched from her living room, the TV light flickering across her hands. The scene felt eerily familiar. A podium, flashing cameras, rows of officials pretending patience, yet Ariel's tone was sharper, fiercer. "Accountability doesn't expire because administrations change," she said, her voice echoing through the plaza. "You can't sunset integrity. You can't defund truth. If the Evans Act saved even one life, it belongs to the people now, not the politicians who want to erase it." The crowd roared. That night, her speech trended worldwide under a new hashtag, "The Daughter Speaks." The backlash subsided within weeks. The funding was restored. The Evans Act survived its first major political threat. When Ariel flew back to Georgia, Monica met her at the airport, waiting just past the security gate. No words, just a long, fierce embrace. "You didn't just protect it," Monica whispered. "You gave it breath again." Months later, a journalist visited Monica for an interview, one of the few she'd agreed to since retiring. The reporter asked, "When you started this, did you ever think it would become a global standard?" Monica smiled softly. "No, I didn't think that far. I just thought about one thing. My daughter breathing again." The reporter paused. "And now that she's leading the movement?" Monica's eyes glistened. "Now I can finally breathe." In the following years, Ariel expanded the foundation into education. She believed reform started before a badge was ever worn. Schools began teaching a new civics curriculum named the Evans Standard, which emphasized empathy, ethics, and equality in law enforcement. Within a decade, police recruitment shifted dramatically. Departments began hiring candidates from social work, psychology, and conflict resolution backgrounds instead of only military veterans. The results were undeniable. Crime rates stabilized, use of force incidents plummeted, and public trust in law enforcement reached its highest level in nearly 50 years. When foreign leaders visited the U.S. to study the Evans model, they often met both women together. Monica would speak of the past of pain, accountability, and truth. Ariel would speak of the future of education, reform, and prevention. Together, they symbolized something governments rarely achieved: continuity of conscience. In her 70s, Monica began writing a memoir, not about fame or reform, but about faith, the kind that keeps a mother from collapsing when everything around her falls apart. The first line read, "Justice begins the moment you stop asking permission to seek it." When the book was published, it became required reading in leadership programs and criminal justice courses. But what touched Monica most weren't the reviews, it was the letters. Thousands of them, handwritten, from people who saw themselves in her story. Mothers, daughters, even police officers who joined the force because of her reforms. One note stood out. It came from a retired officer named Caleb Norris, the same man who had stood silent the night of Ariel's beating. His handwriting trembled. "Mrs. Evans, I should have stopped him. I'll live with that forever. But I wanted you to know I quit the force after that night. I joined the outreach program your daughter built. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for giving this country back its conscience." Monica read it twice before folding it neatly and placing it beside Ariel's old photo. She whispered, "That's all I ever wanted." Years later, When Monica passed away peacefully in her sleep, the world mourned as if it had lost a founding mother of justice. Her funeral drew leaders from across continents. Flags in several cities were lowered to half-staff. But the truest tribute came from Ariel's speech that day. Standing before a crowd holding candles, she said, "My mother didn't chase history. She forced it to pause long enough to look at itself. If justice had a voice, it would sound like hers, calm, steady, and impossible to ignore." The crowd fell silent. The moment stretched timelessly. From that day forward, October 14th was declared Evans Day, honoring both women, the mother who built the movement and the daughter who kept it alive. Decades later, a young recruit standing in a police academy classroom would ask his instructor, "Who was Monica Evans?" The instructor would point to the framed quote above the door, "Justice isn't loud, it's consistent." Monica Evans, and somewhere in the quiet echo of that lesson, her legacy would live on, not in protests, not in politics, but in practice. Because long after headlines faded, long after cameras turned elsewhere, Monica Evans' story had become something far greater than reform. It had become the blueprint for humanity's second chance, integrity. 50 years had passed since that rainy Atlanta night, the night that changed everything. The city was unrecognizable now, gleaming with glass and renewal. In the heart of downtown, where the old precinct once stood, a museum now rose, a tribute not to tragedy, but to transformation. Its name was etched in smooth white stone, the Evans Center for Justice and Human Dignity. Inside its halls, visitors walked through exhibits filled with testimonies, letters, and screens playing footage from decades past. The footage wasn't sensational, it was educational. The story of Monica and Ariel Evans was no longer a headline. It was history. Ariel Evans was 81 now. Her hair had turned silver, her gait slower, but her eyes carried the same light her mother once had, the calm intensity of someone who had seen the world break and mend. She had retired from public service a decade ago, though the title Madam Commissioner still followed her wherever she went. Today, she walked through the museum slowly, leaning on her cane, guided by a young woman barely 30, a journalist writing a book on the Evans century. The woman was named Naomi Hayes, granddaughter of Tyrone Hayes, the activist who'd once stood beside Monica in the streets of Atlanta. Naomi's voice was soft but eager. "Miss Evans, do you ever get tired of telling this story?" Ariel smiled faintly. "No, because every time I tell it, someone else starts believing they can change theirs." Naomi nodded, recording every word. They stopped before a display, a framed copy of the original Evans Act, now yellowed with time. Underneath it, an old photograph of Monica holding a young Ariel's hand outside City Hall. "She looks so calm," Naomi said. "Like she knew everything would change." "She didn't," Ariel replied quietly. "She just refused to stop until it did." As they moved to the next exhibit, a holographic display flickered to life, Monica's voice, recorded decades earlier at her congressional testimony. "You cannot reform what you refuse to measure." The room fell into a respectful hush as visitors listened. Ariel stood still, eyes fixed on the projection of her mother's face. The technology made her almost real, warm light, gentle tone, the same steadiness that had once commanded entire nations to listen. Naomi looked at her. "What does it feel like hearing her voice like that?" Ariel's hand tightened slightly on her cane. "It feels like coming home." Outside, the world had changed in ways even Monica could never have imagined. Law enforcement was now intertwined with AI-driven oversight systems, the Evans Standard algorithm, designed to flag misconduct before it escalated. Every officer's record, every public encounter, every use of authority was logged, reviewed, and made transparent. It wasn't perfect. Nothing human ever was. But the difference was staggering. Across the globe, trust in public institutions had reached record levels. Citizens no longer feared accountability, they expected it. In schools, children no longer learned the Evans story as tragedy, but as proof of resilience. Every textbook included a chapter titled, "The Mother Who Rebuilt Justice," And on October 14th each year, Evans Day people gathered not to protest but to reflect. Cities turned off sirens for 1 minute. Streets went quiet. It was a global tradition of silence, a moment to remember the cost of justice and the courage it demanded. That evening, after the museum tour ended, Naomi escorted Ariel outside. The air was cool, the skyline glimmering with the same gold and blue hues that once symbolized conflict, now unity. Naomi hesitated before asking, "If your mother were here, what do you think she'd say about all this?" Ariel smiled gently. "She'd probably say, 'We're not done yet.'" Naomi laughed softly. "You think there's still more to do?" "There's always more to do," Ariel said. "Justice isn't a monument, it's a motion. It has to keep moving or it dies." They stood there in silence for a moment, the city breathing around them. Then Naomi turned off her recorder and whispered, "Thank you for carrying her story." Ariel looked out toward the skyline. "No," she said quietly. "Thank you for continuing it." Later that night, back in her apartment overlooking the Chattahoochee River, Ariel sat by the window. On her table was a worn leather notebook, her mother's old journal. The pages were fragile, filled with notes, case files, and small moments of tenderness Monica had rarely shown the world. Ariel turned to the final entry, written in fading ink. "If my daughter ever asks me what kept me going, tell her it was." Her voice, even when she couldn't use it. Tears welled in Ariel's eyes. She whispered, "You can rest now, Mama, I found it." She closed the journal gently, set it beside her, and watched the moonlight ripple across the water. Outside, drones patrolled quietly above the street's transparent guardians, reminders of a system once broken but reborn through human will. The world was safer now, not perfect but aware. And awareness, Monica once said, was the beginning of all justice. The next morning, Naomi's article went live. The headline read, "Ariel Evans, the last witness of the first reform." It went viral instantly, not because of the history it recounted, but because of its final paragraph. When asked what her mother taught her, Ariel Evans didn't speak of laws or courts. She said, "She taught me that love, when focused, becomes justice." The line spread like poetry. Schools printed it on walls. Leaders quoted it in speeches. It became the new motto of the Evans Foundation. Love becomes justice. In the years that followed, that phrase outlived both of them. Statues weathered, plaques faded, technology evolved, but the principle endured. Long after Monica and Ariel, Evans were gone. Every time a city chose truth over silence or accountability over comfort, their names echoed softly in the air, not as heroes, not as saints, but as proof that two women armed only with conviction had turned pain into the blueprint for a better world. And somewhere, beyond the noise of progress and time, their voices lingered quiet, steady, eternal. Justice isn't what we demand. It's what we build when we refuse to give up. The city lights flickered. The world kept moving, and the Evans legacy lived on forever in motion, forever unbroken.